From the WKYT studios in Lexington, this is Kentucky Newsmakers with Bill Bryant.
Good morning from WKYT News. Hope you're enjoying your weekend. We continue our conversations with the candidates for governor of the Commonwealth. Today, Attorney General Jack Conway is here. He's the Democratic nominee for governor. The latest WKYT Herald Leader Bluegrass poll showed Conway holding a 5-point lead over Republican Matt Bevin, with independent Drew Curtis much farther back. Conway is running against history, and that no Attorney General has been directly elevated from that office to the governorship since 1899. But his party holds a registration advantage, and he is running an aggressive television campaign. We'll talk about a wide range of issues with the candidates for governor, including what the next administration is likely to face: a huge pension debt, educational improvements that have happened but still leaving the state far behind many others, health care, social issues that have sharply divided the state. Jack Conway is 46. He has been elected and re-elected statewide as Attorney General, and he also lost a race for the state for the U.S. House in 2002 and a bid for the U.S. Senate in 2010. He knows what it's like to win and lose, and now he's weeks away from seeing if Kentuckians will entrust him with the governor's mansion and the executive branch of state government. General Conway, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Bill. It's great to be back with you.
Your term limited as Attorney General. Why did you choose to seek the governorship?
Well, I chose to seek the governorship because I think I can do the job. I really don't have any interest in holding the office, but I think I'm ready to do the job. And Bill, I understand Kentucky. I have a plan for Kentucky. I've delivered for Kentucky. And I, months ago put forward a jobs plan. It focuses on our core strengths here in Kentucky. It focuses on making certain we create the right type of climate for business growth here in the state. We are also focused on the workforce development issues that keep our employers from finding enough skilled workers. We've put out forward an education plan that focuses on early childhood education and making certain kids are ready for kindergarten. We're also proposing enhanced counseling for 11th and 12th graders as they make the decisions with their families about whether or not to take out loans for college or perhaps go into training programs or community and technical college for some of the advanced manufacturing jobs that we have here and we can't find enough workers for. We also challenge our universities to hold down costs, and we're going to challenge the community and technical schools to meet the needs of local employers. So we've put a plan out there, and I think I have a record where I've delivered for the state. As Attorney General, we've shut down working with others, we've shut down about half of the state's pain clinics. I've taken 800,000 child porn images off of the internet. We've returned over $300 million to the state treasury. And we've done all of this while cutting our office's budget by 40%. So I think I've been fiscally responsible. I've got a good record, and I think I'm ready with a plan to be the next governor of Kentucky.
When you said that you're interested in doing the job and not in holding the office, I take that to mean what you're saying is that you don't seek really the title. Is that?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, it's an honor. Don't get me wrong. It's an honor to be the governor of Kentucky, and it would be one of the great honors of my life, but it'll never be as important to me as the title I hold at home, which is of dad. When I come home at night and my girls go, "Daddy," I mean, that's the most important title I'll ever have. But I do see that Kentucky has some historic challenges, and I think I'm ready to put together a government that can meet those challenges.
You mentioned some of the things you've done as Attorney General, but what is it as Attorney General that predicts that you would do a good job as Governor of the Commonwealth?
I think that I've done more with less. I think that I came in as Attorney General during an era of diminishing resources. The legislature cut our budget by 40%, and even while doing that, we got civil collections up over 600%. I took on the pharmaceutical companies, and I think I've evolved and learned as Attorney General. I mean, obviously the drug issue is something that any Attorney General would want to look at, but not only have I done the job from a law enforcement standpoint, as you well know, Bill, I go into schools 2 days a month with mothers who lost their daughters to overdoses. I've been in front of 45,000 kids. I've had them cry on my shoulder. I get up every morning, and I can't forget about the little boy in Scott County just about a year and a half ago who, after our program, took me backstage and cried on my shoulder because both his parents were pillheads and he'd just been placed in foster care and he didn't think anybody cared about him. I think what has happened to me over my term as Attorney General is that, yeah, I'm in law enforcement, but I also want to be focused on education and making certain that kids don't get started with pills. As I've taken on pharmaceutical companies, I made certain that the money we won went toward treatment. I mean, we saved the Chrysalis House here in Lexington. We built the 14th Recovery Kentucky Center. We funded 3 years worth of scholarships for the Recovery Kentucky program. Built about $20 million worth of new adolescent and juvenile treatment all around the state because of my work as Attorney General. So I think people can see as Attorney General that I'm willing to study, listen, and make certain that I find the ways to best tackle a problem.
When you mentioned the drug issue, and as we know in Kentucky, when we have closed one door, another has opened. I mean, we just seem to move. You know, now there's this ice or whatever. You know, there are all these other types of drugs that continue to come into Kentucky. What makes our state dependent on drugs?
Well, I think it's a number of things. I think particularly in the eastern half of the state, you had heavy manufacturing, mining, very labor-intensive work that led to injuries, and people got hooked in the 90s. A lot of the reasons they got hooked, Bill, was because we had pharmaceutical companies that came in here and marketed drugs like OxyContin and told our doctors there was a very low risk of addiction. I mean, one of the reasons I've brought these lawsuits, including the lawsuit against the maker of OxyContin in Pike County, because they literally lied to our doctors. So we had a history of workplace injuries. We had an economic downturn. People are desperate. When people are desperate and unhealthy, they tend to turn to drugs. And it's just another one of those indicators that kind of falls along the lines of public health. It's one of those indicators where we have to get better. We have to get less addicted. And that's why I'm so proud, Bill, actually, that since we started going into schools, that we used to see the data showing 1 in 5 kids in schools at the high school age using prescription pills for an off-label purpose. Now the data shows less than 1 in 10. So maybe I'm a small part of that, but I'm very proud of that work.
You've mentioned education. Kentucky is showing some improvement in our testing, but as we know, deep challenges remain out there for the state to be on par with others. Do you get there by investing more in education, that is, you know, spending more tax dollars, or by insisting on more stringent standards, or what would be your approach generally to education?
Bill, if I could have a legacy when I leave as governor, that people would say he brought Kentucky farther in the area of early childhood education than anyone else, I would be so honored. My wife and I believe passionately, and Sandy joins us in this, my running mate Sandy Overly joins us in this. The kid that shows up for kindergarten ready to learn is the one that will test well in grade school, go on to be college or career ready. The problem is so few of our kids show up ready for kindergarten. Early childhood education is so important. We know that the data shows us that 90% of the brain's function is actually wired by the age of 5. That's why poverty gets cyclical, because you have single parents that are in poverty. They don't have good reading skills themselves, and what happens is their children show up not ready for kindergarten. My goal, I don't know if I can get there or not, but my goal would be as governor that for families at 200% of federal poverty or below, that they're eligible for preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds. If we do that, we can help break the cycle of poverty in a state like Kentucky, and I'm committed to doing that. Yes, we have to do right by the K-12 program. Yes, we have to fund higher education. But the statistics show that for every $1 we invest in early childhood education, society reaps 7 in return. And that's one of the reasons I'm so focused on this. I want to make certain that we're doing right by our children who are in poverty at their tenderest ages. If we try to focus on that, we can make a big difference. And Bill, there is a big difference between the two campaigns on this issue. So I hope that your viewers will study what I've said on the issue and study what my opponent has said.
How do you feel about the Common Core standards that were developed by the various states and have proven to be controversial?
Well, I support local control of public education. I think that's a good thing. But what I'm really sick and tired of is all this rhetoric claiming that the Kentucky core standards are somehow some Washington overreach. That's not the case. They were actually designed by the states. And Kentucky was one of the earliest states to get on board. And since Kentucky adopted the Kentucky core standards some, 4 or 5 years ago, Bill, maybe it's 6 years ago, we've seen our indicators of college and career readiness go from 31% of the kids now to about 62% of the kids. That's a big leap. That's progress. And what I don't want to do is what my opponent is doing, and that is to demagogue some issue and throw out something that is working. You know, do we need to tweak some things? Sure, but that's what local control of schools are all about. But let's not get so caught up in false rhetoric that we actually stop something that's working.
For college graduates who enter life with astronomical debt, we tell young adults that they need a degree, that that's the way you progress in this world, but they spend a lot of money to obtain it and then have real difficulty paying it off when they don't get a job that gives them enough money to do that and to have a car payment and pay rent rent or a house payment. Is there an approach within the state government that you would take on that? You mentioned the holding the universities down with their spending, but those two issues just keep climbing.
Well, there are a lot of things we can do. I mean, one of the reasons as Attorney General, Bill, that I've been so aggressive in going after some of the for-profit colleges, you know, the ones that were more interested in getting their hands on federal student loan dollars and they weren't actually educating people and placing them in jobs. One of the reasons I did that is because I understood how crushing student debt could be. I mean, student aid debt in this country right now outpaces credit card debt. On average, you know, about 60% of Kentuckians take out student loans. They take out on average $25,000 a year. That's debt that's not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So yes, we have to challenge our universities to hold down their costs. I'm worried that we're pricing a whole generation of Kentuckians out of the cost of public education. And one of the other things that we call for in our education plan, and I hope your viewers will go to conwayoverley.com and check it out, we propose something we call the Kentucky Plan Initiative. What it is a more aggressive approach for 11th and 12th graders to say, listen, you're about to make big financial decisions. You know, maybe you didn't expect it when you're this young, maybe it's not fair, but you're going to make decisions about student loans. You need to know the facts about what a community and technical education can provide you. Oh, by the way, Kentucky is in a real shortage of jobs and of workers for the jobs we have in advanced manufacturing. Are you willing to be trained for 2 or 3 years, work someplace for 5 years? That employer may partner with you to pay off your student debt. I mean, there are programs and things like that that we can do to make 11th and 12th graders understand the ramifications of the decisions they're about to make, and not only do that for them, but for their parents. And that's something where I'm going to be more aggressive and help design that program through the Workforce Development Cabinet, through the KCTCS, and through our State Department of Education.
And to maybe realize that if you go to college and you don't really know what you're going to do, but you're spending money to take those basics, and then you
still got to pay it back.
You change the major and all of that. Yeah. I mean, that's all part of the.
No, and listen, we have some
great.
We have some great institutions of higher education here, and I think in Kentucky we need to up our educational attainment levels. But we have to do so in a smart way. I mean, we have to look at higher education in this state, and you know, does the four-year model work for everybody? Does the four-year model work for all of the disciplines that we are teaching?
Well, I think am I hearing you say, you know, the four-year degree is not for everybody?
Well, it's not for everybody. No. I mean, here's a great anecdote. I was in Henderson County a few months ago, and one of the Republicans for Conway, my good friend down there, who's the CEO of Sunrise Tool and Die, took me through his facility. And it was a tool and die place, and they were making the molds for auto parts. He had 50 workers. He was paying them, Bill, on average $100,000 a year. He was working his facility 24/7 in 3 shifts. And he looked me in the eye and he said, Jack, I'm looking for 50 more workers, and I can't find them. Now, the manufacturing takes a couple of years of training. The local community technical school could do it. If the students took out debt and were willing to work there for 5 years, he'd be willing to pay it off. There are all sorts of collaborative approaches and apprenticeship programs. And if we just get the information exchanged between people looking for jobs, people looking to get retrained, and those students who are making those big decisions at those ages.
All right, we're with Jack Conway, who's a candidate for governor of the Commonwealth. He's the Democratic nominee, and we're back on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers with a lot more issues. We're coming up with that in a moment. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We're visiting with Jack Conway. He's the Attorney General of Kentucky, the Democratic nominee for governor, and that election coming up on November 3rd. All right, pensions and health care, a couple of big issues facing the Commonwealth right now. The state has promised its retired state workers and its retired teachers lifelong pensions upon completion of their careers, but not nearly enough money has been set aside to pay those checks. The debt's estimated $30 billion. It has gotten worse in the last few years. That negatively impacts Kentucky's ability to borrow money. Our bond rating is among the worst in the nation. How do you deal with that?
Well, there are 2 separate issues, both the state retirees and then the teachers. Let me start with the state retirees. Most people don't realize, Bill, that over the last 6 years we've actually changed the rules twice in Frankfort for current and future employees. There's no more double dipping. People have to work longer. They have to contribute more. And we now have what the Pew Foundation on the states came in and recommended to us is we have a hybrid plan. It's part defined benefit, part defined contribution. It actually takes care of the problem in the out years. But what we have is a very immediate problem in the Kentucky employees non-hazardous there, and then there's not enough money. It's only about 22 to 25% funded depending on which day you look at it. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to make the actuarial required contribution in each and every budget cycle. Whatever that ARC payment is, we need to make it. Now, we made it last time. The actuarial required payment for the next budget is about $66 million more. We're projecting a $219 million surplus for the next budget. I think this is manageable. But we're going to have to get into the budget and look at how we can reallocate some resources or what we can do to make certain that we have a dedicated stream of revenue moving into that ARC payment. Because what the rating agencies are saying to us is, look, you can't make the governor find savings and take money out of the road fund. Show us long term that you're going to make these actuarial required payments. What happened in Frankfurt was they stopped making the payments for a long period of time. They made assumptions about growth and income into the systems. And then 2008 hit. We had the financial collapse, and we got behind the 8 ball. So we got into this mess over 10 to 15 years. It's going to take 10 or 15 years to get out. Now, on the teacher side, what you have is not so immediate a problem, but a bigger problem. And in fact, the unfunded liability there is about $500 million. But one thing I want to be clear on is we have to stand by the promises that we made to our teachers. We cannot move away from that defined benefit because, Bill, teachers don't participate in Social Security. And if we were to do what my opponent wants to do, and that's to move teachers to a 401k plan, if they retire at the wrong time, they could be in a situation where they're retired and in poverty. And I'm not willing to do that. Now, Governor Beshear has put forward a task force. They're working right now. They're supposed to make recommendations in December about what needs to be done. And I look forward to being the new governor that receives those recommendations. And I'll sit down with both houses and both parties and try to figure something out.
Does there need to be more transparency in these funds?
Yes.
I mean,
yes, especially yes.
Understand where the money is invested.
Yes, undoubtedly. There needs to be more transparency, and in fact, there are some provisions that allow the retirement systems not to disclose the investment fees that they're paying to hedge fund managers and the Wall Street types. I think the price of doing business with state government is transparency. I don't think you ought to expect to do business with any arm of state government without transparency. Now, I understand in negotiating economic development deals, we look at certain companies' business confidential information. That might be the one exception that I could agree to. But in general, the rule is dealing with state government means transparency, and I think there needs to be more of it with these retirement systems.
Governor Beshear expanded Medicaid with the stroke of a pen, and nearly 500,000 Kentuckians who did not previously have health coverage now do. But the federal government is paying all of that through 2017, and after that, the state has to assume part of that bill. Some estimates of that are $300 million. Are you fully confident that Kentucky can pay its share?
I'm reasonably confident. Governor Beshear commissioned a study. It was done by Deloitte that took a look at the increased economic activity in and around Connect and the expansion of Medicaid and having more people covered by health insurance. And they saw over 6 years tens of billions of dollars in additional revenue, thousands of new jobs created. And they looked specifically at the window of 2017 to 2021, and that is when we have to begin to pay this. Now, let me stop for a second. Medicaid normally, Bill, is a 30-70 match. State puts up 30 cents, draws down 70 from the federal government. For the expansion, the highest we go to in 2021 is 10%. So it's still a 3 times better deal than normal Medicaid. But starting in 2017, we have to pick up a fraction of it, and it gets to 10% by 2021. What the Deloitte study shows us is actually with the new economic activity and the savings to the general fund and enhanced revenues to the general fund, that I think we're about $180 million to the black in year 1, about $80 million to the black in year 2, and it actually shows that this is going to be able to pay for itself. Now, I will be monitoring that. I'm reasonably confident it can pay for itself. I think the Beshear administration and the subsequent Conway administration need to show the people of Kentucky that, yes, we're segregating this money to pay for Medicaid. And look, if we get 6 years down the road and we can't afford something, we may have to work with the federal government to scale back or to make some changes. But what I'm not going to do, Bill, what I'm not going to do is what my opponent has been clear that he would do, which is to come in on day 1 of his administration and reverse Governor Beshear's Medicaid expansion. And if he were to do that, he would kick nearly 500,000 people off of their health care coverage. And I think that's very callous.
The State Health Exchange, Connect, do you support it continuing?
Yes, because I think what we've shown with health care reform is that if you put all the Washington rhetoric aside and we do something the Kentucky way, we can do it competently and we can make something work. And with Connect, you know, it's paying for itself by a 1% fee that's on the insurers that was already in place. We're doing it efficiently. My opponent says he's just going to take us to the federal exchange. Well, to take us from a state exchange to a federal exchange is going to cost $23 million, it's estimated, that we don't have. On top of that, it's more expensive for the insurers to participate in a federal exchange than it is our state exchange. And when you're running a state exchange, the Attorney General could come in and look at consumer protection issues, which is very important. So I do support keeping Connect. I think it's been a national model.
Now, you said we don't have $23 million, so we start making this contribution to shore up the pensions. You start potentially having to, in 2017, fund part of the Medicaid. You said you want money for early childhood education. Where does this money come from? Where do you cut state government elsewhere to make those things
Well, I think
happen?
we can always find efficiencies in state government. And look, I have a positive track record here, Bill. I cut my own office's budget by 40%. We may have to take a look at some issues as to how large is the transportation fleet the state's maintaining. Can we cut there? Are there certain functions in public protection that are duplicative of what we're doing at the local government, and can we be more efficient there? We're projecting a $219 million surplus. You know, where does some of that money go, and what are the priorities? Look, I will readily acknowledge that we can't afford everything. But when I look at early childhood education in particular, I think we can do a little bit more there. There potentially are federal funding streams becoming available. I think we can reallocate some resources. I think we can work with local school districts. It doesn't have to be that expensive. It really doesn't. And look, I've said publicly, Bill, that I'd love another round of Bucks for Brains funding, but you know what? I don't think we can afford it in my first budget. So I have a track record of being fiscally responsible, and I will be that as governor.
Another expenditure, there's the Prince Spence Bridge in northern Kentucky. A large sector of the nation's economy rides on that span across the Ohio River. It's been deemed obsolete. Pieces of it fall off into the water. Do you have a plan for dealing with it eventually?
Oh, I think eventually we're going to come up with a plan for it, but I think what we haven't seen in northern Kentucky is a consensus around a financing plan. So I've been clear that I don't support tolling it. I'm not going to support that in the next session of the General Assembly. You know, those are two federal highways coming together there in Cincinnati. The federal government needs to step up here. I mean, everyone knows I make my home in Jefferson County. We've had a bridge debate there that's been going on since 1994, and it's going to be a 22-year process.
But you finally have your bridges.
Oh, we finally got it.
Yeah.
But you know what happened on the front end? A lot of federal planning money came forward. A lot of federal planning money to look at the routes. What happened? What are the environmental impacts? That all came on the front end. And then the Department of Transportation in Kentucky got together with the Indiana Department of Transportation and came up with a financing plan. You know, until last week's resignation, we had the Speaker of the House on one side of the river and the Majority Leader of the United States Senate on the other. And they can't come up with the federal planning money to get this thing started. This is the federal interstate highway system we're talking about. I want to see some federal money on the front end.
Matt Bevin has indicated that he could support the idea of a bypass and then another bridge elsewhere, not that downtown crossing. Do you agree with that?
I don't think we need. The bypass goes way out of the way. It creates a huge new road to the southern part of the counties of northern Kentucky. I don't know if anybody's speculating on land up there or not, but I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think the eventual solution is to modernize that bridge corridor up there, because it's so important for the way traffic, which is so important to economic development, flows in and around Covington and in and around Cincinnati, that I don't think that bypass is the preferred solution.
Our remaining moments with Jack Conway, Democratic nominee for governor, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, coming up on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers as we visit with Democratic candidate for governor Jack Conway. And of course, we're interviewing all of the candidates for governor in a series of interviews here on Newsmakers. We know this is a time of great social change in America. Kentucky's become the focal point of the debate about same-sex marriage. Your role, General Conway, was not to appeal the original federal court ruling striking down Kentucky's ban that was overwhelmingly passed by voters. Was Governor Beshear correct to go ahead and appeal?
You know, I had a difference of opinion on that. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that I felt like we shouldn't appeal. When Judge Haburn came down with this decision, Bill, I read it. You know, I defended the law. I defended the law in the trial court, and we lost. And then I had a decision to make. And I'm amused now that all these people claim that I didn't do my job. In fact, KRS Chapter 15 is very, very clear that I have the discretion whether to appeal or not on behalf of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Moreover than that, there's case law from the highest court in our land that says that I have a duty to tell agencies and to tell the state when something is unconstitutional. So I looked at the case. I realized that nothing in the decision told a minister or a congregation what they had to do. Additionally, we were going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, which turned into millions of dollars, to defend something that I thought we were ultimately going to lose, and we ultimately did lose. And finally, I told the people of Kentucky that the good-paying jobs of the future are coming to states with policies of inclusivity. And so I think I made the right decision. Governor Beshear disagreed with me. You know, he was my client. I can't say what we were going back and forth with at that point. He had his opinion, I had mine, and we just simply disagreed.
The U.S. Supreme Court ultimately legalized same-sex marriage. Do you now, if you were to become governor, plan to allow clerks who do not wish to issue licenses in their name some way of opting out of that?
Well, first of all, let me say this, that, you know, Kim Davis, I don't think she went to jail because of her religious beliefs. She went to jail because she defied a federal court order. And I realize that passions are running real high on this issue. And I've wanted to exercise my authority with calm discretion. But what I'm open to is in a regular session of the General Assembly, not a special session that's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars, but in a regular session, if we can work together and come up with a narrowly tailored solution that both upholds the U.S. Supreme Court decision, but also allows something narrow for those few clerks to exercise their religious objections, I'm open to that.
How would you be in a crisis if we were taping this program and you were holding the governorship and somebody had to come up and whisper something in your ear? How prepared are you to command the National Guard and respond to the unforeseen?
I think I'm very prepared. You know, I've been a legal counsel to the governor in the past. I did that for 6 years. So I know the way that the National Guard is activated. I know the proper channels. I think I'm very prepared. I've been the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Kentucky now for 8 years. I've been, you know, and I've been tested. You know, I've been tested in many ways. What I've learned during my service, Bill, is that stay calm. If someone's forcing you to make a decision that goes against your gut, step back, get the people around you, reassess, and make the right decision. That's a lesson that I've learned in my public service. I will not go off half-cocked. I will not go off unprepared. And one thing about being governor, if you're going to be a good governor, is you can't act like you have all the answers. I'm not here today, and I'll never be in front of the people of Kentucky acting like I have all the answers. But you know what I've done during my career? I've built up a lot of relationships and a lot of friendships, and I know how to get the people around me in very quick order to help me make the right decision. And I think I would be very, very good in a crisis.
Do you have in the back of your mind what an administration would look like if you're elected? Just a few seconds left.
Well, I've got it in the back of my mind, but that kind of falls into the category of measuring the drapes. I've got a 5-point lead right now, and I don't believe in measuring the drapes. It's kind of, I'm a little superstitious that way, but I think my experience in Frankfort and the people I know will allow me to put together a very good government very quickly.
Jack Conway, who's the Democrat running for governor and the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Good to be here, Bill. Thank you so much.
And we hope you'll stay with us here on WKYT for the latest news throughout the day, and we hope you make it a good week ahead.